This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. Happy New Year to everyone. I sincerely hope that you had a good time during the holidays and that you're fit and healthy. Today's episode, the first of 2022, promises to be a good one. It's going to help you reflect on how you want to be during 2022 and onwards. My guest, Jon Bartlett, who works as a performance and programs operations advisor for the NBA in New York and has experiences working at Liverpool Football Club, with the national team at the FA in England and in Australian rules football, and I go on to discuss his why. Jon tells me about his background, what shaped his why, ideas on how you can go about finding your why, and explaining why you need to delve deep and understand it, and then the positive impact it can have on your life and the lives of other people when you do really fully understand it. Hi, Jon. Would you like to tell the listeners a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, David. And thanks for the invite onto your podcast. I really appreciate the opportunity to share some stuff on sort of my thoughts on finding your why. So I'm originally from the UK, did my PhD in Liverpool 12 years ago now, or started it 12 years ago. And during that time, I was able to start and gain some work with Liverpool Football Club. And shortly after that, the England national football teams as well. And it was really research around what or how do we adapt to training, essentially, from a muscle physiology standpoint. So that's probably my first opportunity to say here is that psychology is not my background, and I haven't been trained as a psych. A lot of my thoughts that we'll talk about in the next little while are very much around experiences and sort of passions and interests I have. So, and a lot of my own reading. When I finished in the UK, I moved to Australia and lived there for 6 years. I spent time with two different Australian rules football clubs, aligned with two different Australian universities. Again, did a lot of research, very much a sports science background, how we apply sports science day to day, a lot of people management, program management, integrated research, informing daily decisions, impacting performance on the field every day. And then 18 months ago, moved to New York and took up a role with the NBA. With the NBA, my role is to help manage and oversee a lot of the performance programs for all the NBA academies that we have around the world. So that finds me here now.
Excellent. Some exciting clubs and environments you've been involved in there. Have you noticed much differences in the cultures between football and Aussie rules and then basketball now?
Not a huge amount. I think it's more about the different countries' cultures which manifest into the sports and how that shapes people and shapes their values and how they go about their ways and the things they do and how they do things. I think sport in general, wherever you are, is quite similar from an environment point of view. You've got the same goals, same endpoints, same challenges. The context is just slightly different. So I think some of the biggest differences come from the cultures within the countries and how that manifests in the people you work with.
So, well, let's dig into your why. And as we know, understanding your own why, it's quite complex. It's a process. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit more about your why and why that is the case, why it is so complex?
Yeah, sure. It's actually one of those where it is that complex sometimes. It's difficult to know where to start. And I think it's probably something a lot of people think about, but they don't really go any further than thinking about what it is. And I think at a superficial level, there's a why to why we do anything. Why I go and buy a watch, why I go and buy a certain car, why I go to this supermarket rather than that supermarket. So there's always a why to something. And I think what we're talking about here is that real deep inner core values piece. that essentially, I think, through a lot of our training and development over the years, doesn't really get much attention. And so people don't necessarily know how to get to their inner core. I listened to one of your previous podcasts on about rediscovering our identity. I think it was from July. And that process went through. And I think what we're talking about here is identity. We're talking about purpose, and we're talking about why do you really, really do something on a daily basis? And it will change through your career. It will change through your life. And it's likely situational. Why did I move to Australia? Why did I move to New York? Why do I do what I do when I travel? I mean, I love travel. That's part of parcel of what I enjoy doing. But I think when you're able to connect with that inner peace, you can really have a reference point then for decision making. And as I've become more experienced and gained an understanding of how things are done differently, different places, what I've come to realize is that spending time with people I want to spend time with is important. Being committed and having a vision that feeds into a bigger objective is really important. Having alignment with organizational values and cultures is really important. And then having that why and understanding that why helps you to understand, do you align with those things and how things are done as well? And, you know, we talk a lot about, the extrinsic part of sport and academia, number of papers we publish, amount of research income we can generate, wins and losses on the weekend, training availability, injury records, you name it. We often judge ourselves on these successes or failures. Now, only one team wins at the end of the season. You might have a good winning record, but only one team ultimately wins the championship. And what I think is really important here is when we do judge ourselves on those tangible outcomes and they don't happen, where do we go to? And a lot of the time it's, we haven't won, and then you start judging yourself, I'm a failure, and so on. And then that just unravels. And obviously mental health and well-being is becoming a really topical, contemporary issue. People feeling a lot more comfortable about talking about the issue. The stigma is starting to be taken away from the issue. I mean, Jordan Henderson spoke today about mental well-being of footballers. It's not considered. And so I think there's an opportunity now to really delve into it. And ultimately what it requires is a thirst and an absolute intense love for self-development and self-growth and to learn more about yourself, ultimately.
I'm going to take you back to, when you talk about values and organizational values. Firstly, though, I'm guessing from the way you're talking through the different experiences, you must have reflected back and got quite clear on your own personal values firstly.
100%. I think it allows you to make decisions based on what feels right to you. I think if you're not living true to your own self, there's no authenticity there. You turn up to work as one person, you go home as someone else. When really, I mean, in my world, my life, I work 67 hours a week. That's just reality. That's what I do. That's the demands of my time. And so if I'm showing up differently in work as I do at home, it's almost you've got a Jekyll and Hyde. And so you live in a different life. You live in a different person. You live in something that's different to you. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about what I stand for, what I value. And I think it's massively important that who I work with and for also share some of those similar values and how things are done.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting one when it gets to organizational and cultures, because often the words are only words, and some corporations, some companies out there, they might have these lovely words, but actually when it gets down to it inside, on a daily basis, those values are that's all they are, words, and they're on paper, but they're not actually acted out.
And that's the bedrock of culture, right? That's doing what you say you're going to do. That's ultimately in its simplest, purest form. That's what it means. And I think culture is something that you do too. It's not something that does to you, if that makes sense. And I think as practitioners and people that work in sport and or academia, we often forget that we are a piece of that fabric as well, and we can shape that in some shape or form. And we are moving to a much more sort of acknowledged approach within sport and different structures. It's a lot more collaborative, and everybody's got a voice, and this type of approach where you can have an impact. You're not at the bottom of the tree. You haven't not got a voice. You're there because you can have impact and you can have influence, and therefore you can contribute in some shape or form. And so if you understand what your values are and what you stand for, that can inherently shape the culture internally as well. Yeah, for sure. On the wall, there's words and values, but how are they lived out? And if you can contribute some shape or form to that and you align with them, then I think you go to work with a much happier person, and you don't look at those extrinsic things on a daily basis. How do we get to that point?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting one, this, because if we look at mental toughness, and it's quite a complex trait, but you've touched on three things for me there. One would be the commitment level, where when you say you're going to do something, you actually do it. Secondly would be the can-do attitude, in terms of you've got some choices to make to follow through with your actions. And then lastly would be this voice, as you say, and influencing people and different decisions. And often people they might fabricate things quite a lot and not actually follow through. Some people that sense of can-do attitude might not quite be there. And then again, likewise with the sort of the voice. I think in sport, you've mentioned there about extrinsic things. Sometimes it's those extrinsic demands like rock us and prevent us from actually following through.
100%. I think the extrinsic things can suck the life out of people. I think probably anybody could read between the lines in my article that I've written recently on finding your why. That sucked the life out of me, being at the wrong end of the table and losing every week. It's really, really challenging. You do question why you're doing what you're doing and why you do it and how you do it. And that's why I think it's just so important to really get into that sort of deeper level of why I'm actually doing this. And a lot of the time it is to serve others. It's to share something with people, share a vision, share a responsibility, and try and achieve something with a group of people. Certainly in team sports. Olympic sports might be different, but certainly in team sports, there's certainly that approach that people play in a team because they enjoy doing it with their teammates. And the same goes for staff groups as well.
So that social element, the banter that comes with it, the celebrating the wins with the teammates, all of those sort of factors.
And don't get me wrong, those feelings are pretty good. I mean, they are pretty good. If you have a good win and a couple of beers after, and you have that feeling of euphoria, there's not many things that rival that. But when it doesn't happen, it's the opposite. And when it continually happens, it's that's the challenge. And I think that's where we need to get to a point as an industry, just having a rain check sometimes, just thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this?
Have you ever been in situations there where teams have struggled for a period of time, then where it's been a bit of a struggle, and you've noticed the culture changing?
I guess so, yeah. I've experienced places where there's been high turnover of staff, a change in management, a change in people you work with, and inherently that changes the culture quite quickly. And the change is obviously done for a reason. Sometimes change is needed. I'm not saying change shouldn't be done. Change is often needed. And one thing we do know in sport is change is constant. You're always trying to see what's next and innovate and do something differently. So we've got to be comfortable with experiencing change and managing through change and implement change if you're in those positions. But it's then about how you live through that as well. And in some shape or form, aligning with some of it. And in some experiences, you may not agree with some of the things that the organization does. And that's really where I'm coming from the organizational values and culture piece, is how things are done. and how you show up yourself. Do you align with that? If not, then do you need to take a different direction, for example? I'm not saying you need to. And some people very happy in getting a role that they've always wanted, and they'll turn out, they'll do their role really, really well, and they'll have something outside, another purpose and other interests, and lots of people do. But sport is also something where it demands so much of your time. For 9 or 10 months of the year, you are fully locked in. And I mean, if you look at some of the travel schedules with some sports, like cricket, for example, you could be away in the southern hemisphere for 4 or 5 months at a time. And during the COVID era, families may not be able to travel either. So why do you do that as a player and a staff member, you know?
Yeah.
So, I think it's critical.
Yeah, and you could be a part of the England Ashes squad and getting a good hiding at the moment.
No comment.
Yeah. I imagine you might be getting a little bit of stick from your Australian friends on that one.
Yeah, just a bit.
So I suppose the reason why I ended up reaching out to you was it came from an article that you wrote in a Bases magazine. And I believe from what we discussed before we went on air there, you actually wrote about 4,000 words. So I'm guessing that gave you a good inkling into like how you actually go about finding your why. Do you want to, again, just tell the listeners a little bit more about that and how you actually find it?
Yeah, sure. Like I say, it's really a process over time. And I was probably afforded a good opportunity through Bases to get a lot of my thoughts down on paper. Now, I think the first thing to really highlight here is you've got to be absolutely committed to wanting to find out about yourself, who you are as a person, what you value, what you stand for, how you show up, how you want people to consider you and think about you, and all those sort of things. And this really has allowed me to really sort of align my thoughts and put them in some sort of shape or form, if you like. And they are just a handful of the experiences I've had and some of my reflections. And I think it's something that evolves and changes over time as well. It's definitely not something that's fixed. My why now is probably very different to 10 years ago when I first decided to do a PhD and go into football. But I think ultimately it's a mindset. And 3 key things I think really help this. It's about continually thinking about what your philosophy and approach is. It's about recognizing what you value. And it's about identifying your immediate purpose, because your purpose will change. I know you might have your first kid and now all of a sudden your priorities in your life have changed completely. Now your priority is, and your purpose is your son or your daughter. I haven't got kids, but I love what I do. Absolutely love my job. Very blessed to be able to do what I love to do and travel the world to do it. So it's allowed me to discover more and more about myself. And I think there's a number of different questions you can continue to ask yourself. Stuff such as, what is it that I'm trying to do? Is it working? What am I doing that impacts my influence? What do I change? What traits or behaviors annoy me? How do I subsequently respond to that? How do I like to communicate? How do I like to receive feedback? What drains me? What energizes me? All these type of questions. In isolation, they likely don't go to the depths needed in order to really understand your values, your why. And they're also often overlooked. I mean, in some regard, we probably do those things subconsciously. If we just pick up, for example, how do I like to receive feedback? That might be a workshop with your own organization on self-development or how we work as a department. And so that's one piece. And we do it subconsciously. We do it with a group. But it matters so much to developing a sense of you. And I think once you understand this, you know how to go about your day. It permits you to really commit and align with those around you, or it doesn't. I think that's, and there's obviously a space in between those as well. And you're trying to reduce that space of greyness. And I think there's probably a number of people who do sit in that area of grey, not really sure, don't I, sort of thing. But equally, if you're in a role or you're heading to a role, on a pathway to more responsibility, for example, including that people management, program management, really helps determine your approach as well. And I love the quote by Maya Angelou around how people forget what you said, they forget what you did, but they'll never forget how it made you feel. And it's so true that if you treat people how you like to be treated because you know how it feels, it's probably parallel to them too. And that's something that's probably shaped me over time, is just thinking, how would I respond if someone did that to me, or spoke to me like that, or treated me like that, or that was a situation, or think about how that would make me be, and then use that as a tool. So I don't think there's any one way of being able to go and finding your why. There's a number of different things, but ultimately you've got to start somewhere. And if you haven't got any clue whatsoever, go and find a coach or a mentor who's got a bit of experience, because they've probably been through a similar scenario or situation.
Where do I take this? You mentioned so many fascinating things there. I'll go with, you mentioned that point about how it makes you feel there, and being so vital. At the end of the day, if you're in a managerial role, you're high up in an organization, and you're showing your employees respect, trust, you're helping them feel good in themselves, then on a day-to-day basis consistently, then yeah, they're going to remember you down the track in years gone by.
100%. And I think when you talk of like certain values around honesty, transparency, humility, integrity, the subsequent piece to that is feelings, because there's that respect piece and there's that trust piece, and it's authentic. It's you. And some people might not like that, but at least they've got the respect of, oh, he's honest or she's honest. And I think we know through leadership that trust is the fundamental first step in basically being able to influence and impact. If you've got the trust, things happen. If you don't have the trust, there's issues. And so understanding your why, what your values are and how you show up and what you stand for, helps you identify that trust factor as well and build that trust factor.
Can I circle back as well to, you mentioned about your philosophy and approach and how it's changed. Do you just want to share with the listeners how it's different now when you were involved in football to where you are in the current role?
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, this is more of a real personal piece. Those close to me know that my father has experienced some challenges health-wise, and he worked all his life to get to retirement, to go and spend the rest of it with my mum and go and do things. And he would work so hard to the point where he would do anything for anybody else, nothing for himself, to the point where at 65 he could retire and go and travel and go and do what they wanted together. Unfortunately, late 50s, early 60s, he got diagnosed with Parkinson's. And that sort of put a spanner in the works somewhat, that when he did get to a point of retirement, it advanced to a stage where he couldn't do what he wanted to do. And I also remember a quote that my granddad shared was, you spend the first 20 years of your life learning, the middle 40 years of your life earning, and then you spend the rest of it spending the money. And so the experience that my dad had really said to me, go and do what you want to do now, because when you get to the point where you have the money and the time, you might not have the opportunity to do so. And so that's where my philosophy and approach has changed over time. It was a real personal piece that hit me. I apologize for this. There's some background noise. There's some landscapers sorting the gardens out. So I apologize.
Bad timing.
Yeah. And so that's, for me, that's what shaped me. I mean, that took place 10 years ago initially, and then it's just been every year when you see things advance and develop, it says to me more and more. And he wouldn't have it any other way. It's like, go and do what you do. And I'm lucky to be in a position where I can do that. I'm supported through my partner, Lindsay. She loves doing that too. She loves to explore and discover and travel and experience things. And so being able to earn money doing what I love, wherever I feel like doing it, it's pretty special. And so that's really how my philosophy and approach has changed over time.
Appreciate you sharing that personal story there, and obviously very sorry to hear about your dad's health there. Would you like to now just go on and share 3 takeaways for the listeners in terms of what it is that we've discussed?
I think even since we've been talking, I've just sort of thought a little bit about it. And I think how you spend your time is so critically important, and what you spend your time on. And where I'm coming from that is we develop a skill set to deliver our roles day to day. We identify a little gap in our skill sets that we want to develop, but how much time are we spending actually on ourselves to develop as well? I think the second one is the self-development piece and recognizing a passion for it and having a purpose. It just doesn't happen. You've got to be really, really intentional. And you've got to work hard at yourself. And the third one for me is, I think I might have mentioned it just before, but if you don't know where to start, then seek out a coach or a mentor to help you with it. And we're not talking about the old adage of a shrink or anything like that. We're talking about someone to just pose questions and ask questions and help you uncover. And sometimes that's all it needs, someone just to ask the right questions and then create space to then think for yourself about it.
Yeah, I love them takeaways. And at the very end there, you mentioned there about creating space and the right questions being asked there. Yeah, so many people just get sucked into being on the treadmill, don't they? Being busy, and they don't create that space. And then again, they'll be a bit frightened about just seeking some support, as opposed to, even if it is from a friend or a coach or something like that, and actually opening up.
100%. 100%. And I think creating that space is even just as simple as, do you even reflect on your day to day? Do you reflect on what happened in the week? Do you make meaning of an experience? I think I spoke about that in the article, is making meaning of experience help you then think about what it means to you, how it's changed you, if it even has it slightly evolved something else, has it taught you a little bit more about yourself? But creating space, I think, is a skill. Obviously, mindfulness and meditation becoming a really popular approach towards this. And people have different ways of doing it. I love to stand in a shower. Like, the shower is where you're disconnected from devices and communication and phones and messages. And there's something about just water just going down the drain. It's like, it creates space. And or walking the dog, if you can dare leave your phone at home.
Not take pictures on Instagram.
Exactly, yeah. So I think just creating half an hour here, 20 minutes there, just allows you to sort of just delve a little bit in, think about things, write it down, move on. And over time, those things accumulate and accumulate. So understanding more about yourself.
Yeah, some great advice there. So whereabouts can the listeners reach out to you if they want to have a conversation or get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn. Happy to direct message me on those 2 platforms. I'd always get back regardless. So yeah, I'm probably a bit less busy on posting stuff now, just because of demands on my time. But certainly more than happy to talk with anybody who shares similar thoughts or wants to just share anything that they want to.
Brilliant. Well, much appreciated for your time today, Jon. I really enjoyed the conversation, and some fantastic messages there for the listeners.
No problem. Thanks, David. And again, thanks for inviting me onto your podcast and with the opportunity to share some of my thoughts.
Well, that was a nice way to start the new year. And I hope the conversation and insights from Jon have helped you consider more about why you do what it is that you do, and how that you can go on to discover your why. By thinking about some of the questions that Jon posed, it's going to help you develop more intrinsic motivation, meaning whatever you do, that you'll be able to place more of a real interest in exploring and mastering skills. You're going to be able to learn for learning's sake. You'll be better able to place instant results and the pressures to perform to one side. and remain committed to your goals. In mental toughness terms, you'll end up setting better goals and you'll give yourself more opportunities to achieve those goals, despite the natural pressures and undoubted setbacks that are going to occur. Ultimately, then, you're going to be less likely to be derailed if you know your why. So a big thank you to Jon for his insights and for you for listening today. I hope it goes on to help you have a successful start to 2022. And please do get in touch with me via social media to let me know how I can also make 2022 an even more successful year for this podcast and grow it further and help you. Enjoy your week ahead. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sports psychology resources. The Sport Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.